Welcome to the Batman Book Club on YouTube from page to screen. Yes, this is a new series here on YouTube. And I'm kicking it off with my pal here, my pal Paul Hermann from the Comic Binge.
Hi.
Hey, Paul.
Oh, hi. Hi.
Hey. So
How
he
you
may
doing?
sound familiar to you guys because he was on the most recent episode of the Batman Book Club podcast talking about Under the Hood. And Paul, we told people then that we were going to launch this thing on YouTube where people should be seeing our faces right now, so that we can kick off this new series. Yes, Batman Under the Red Hood, where it's going to be a series where we'll see comic book stories that were translated to animation, compare, contrast, better, worse, just really give it a chance to talk, maybe spread out the whole animated question I ask at the end of each podcast. We can expand it just a little bit and maybe dive into some others that we may never get to on the show. So, Paul, thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining
Absolutely.
me.
This is an honor to be on your first ever video podcast. This is an honor.
I don't know if I like how I look.
No,
it's much more comfortable. No camera, only audio.
Oh, well, dude, it is. Let me tell you, it is anyone who has the guts to do anything, whether or not it's just a podcast. But I feel like the first one, if you're anyone brave enough to do a podcast, you're brave. Video, you are very brave because everything sticks out there, and it is not easy, not just to look at yourself all the time, because I hate looking at myself. I don't blame other people for not wanting to look at me either. And then you have to add in the fact you have to edit all that stuff and you look at yourself. It's even worse than hearing yourself constantly.
Yeah. I may cut this out and put Ryan Reynolds' face over mine. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see about that.
or like Deadpool, put like Hugh Jackman's, like cut out of Hugh Jackman's.
Yeah. And then for somebody who was like, Paul, I need to do more video podcasting because the views are insane.
I wish.
So as you said, you pointed at yours. There's mine. Batman Under the Red Hood. Quick background on the movie. It was straight to
rental.
Straight to disc. Oh, rental. You got a rental on there. In July of 2010. It's directed by Brandon Vietti, which he may sound familiar to some of you. He did last year's Death in the Family, Choose Your Own Adventure style movie. He's also directed episodes of Batman Brave and the Bold. He's directed episodes of The Batman. The guy has dipped into Gotham quite a bit in animation. Written by Judd Winnick. Yes, 1994's Real World San Francisco. Judd Winnick, who also wrote the story. Paul and I will talk about that here in just a moment. Some of the cast: Bruce Greenwood is Batman. He's also voiced Batman in the Young Justice cartoon. Jensen Ackles voices Jason Todd Red Hood. Also recently voiced Batman in The Long Halloween. John DiMaggio, who's done every single thing you can even think of. Neil Patrick Harris as Nightwing. Jason Isaacs as Ra's al Ghul. Wade Williams as the Black Mask, who coincidentally also voiced Harvey Dent in The Dark Knight Returns, as well as Killer Croc in Beware the Batman. So, Paul, this movie, do you remember your first instinct? You explained a little bit on the podcast when you first watched the movie. Do you remember what was your first reactions to the movie?
Yeah, so the movie is actually what introduced me to the whole story. For those who don't know, I'm a giant Marvel fan, so I didn't at the time. I dive more to DC now than ever, but at the time I was, only Batman stuff, but it was only, trades and here and there as far as stories and things like that. I wasn't actively I knew the Red Hood was coming back, or Jason Todd Red Hood. I didn't know how they were going to do it. I was kind of whatever. My brother one day bought, as you see, it says rental on the bottom of this. He went and bought the going out of business Blockbuster Blu-ray. I think I just got this is only within the same year I bought my first Blu-ray player.
Wow.
I want to say, it was a long
old
time.
Times.
It was a long time ago. And my I was like, oh cool, I want it'd be cool to watch that. And I watched it. Always being a Robin fan and interested in how Jason Todd came back, I was blown away how much I loved it. And I remember watching it and I love the Death in the Family intro, which I was not expecting. It remains, and I'll be honest, I'll say this right now off the bat. I have a hard time with animation adaptations now. It's funny because I don't know if I'd love this now if I watched it, not loving it before. So if I had never seen this before and watched it, I don't know if I'd love it as much, but because for some reason it's hard for me to connect to these animated movies a lot of times, because and some are better than others, obviously. But this one, I thought it captured all the characters so well. And and it really told a really great story all the way through, and it's paced beautifully. And I was captivated immediately from that. And I went out and bought those trades we did a review on, which I didn't read for a long time after I bought them. But I bought them immediately because I wanted to read the comic books. I love that movie so much. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about in this movie, I think itself. And I guess we'll wait to go more praise later on, because I'll be honest, to be nothing but gushing at this point for me. I think this movie is just phenomenal, a phenomenal adaptation, to be honest.
You've actually got a bunch of hearts just like popping out around your head. You can just tell how much in love Paul is with this movie.
I do.
I equally match like everything that you're saying. For me, by the time this came out, I was in college, but I was making no. I graduated. I was out of college. I was making my own money. And so everything I could buy of Batman, I made it Wayne on this. And I bought it right away, watched it right away, loved it instantly. I think I watched the bonus stuff on it and then watched the movie again. I think it's still, even 11 years later, one of DC's maybe like strongest animated efforts. I think it's a very concise story in which I know that you paused a little bit as we were recording, and I said, well, Judd Wittick, it's almost like he got a second chance on the story for the movie because he trimmed some fat. And you were like, whoa, you shut your damn mouth, because the comic book story is perfect. But by that, I feel like this movie is very focused, and it really, it's about Batman and Jason, and the others are just kind of there to help spice up the story, and they are connected as well. But our favorite part, as we talked about on the podcast, of the comic book story, like that is front and center here in the movie. So I think that a lot of the different elements, which I didn't even mention, of course, that the music, Christopher Drake did the music, and I love the music, especially like I think in the credits, there's something, it's almost like it does this, like it's really quiet, and then like this, I don't know what instrument it will be, but it's just like it's on its own. It goes high and then low, and then it's kind of slow and like emotional. Something I just thought Drake did like an amazing job. Not the Drake, but you know what I'm saying, Christopher Drake. There we go. Okay,
there you go.
I love the movie. I love the movie too, Paul.
No, I was gonna wait to say it, but you already kind of beat me to it. Actually, I'm a little offended you didn't wait for me. No,
my bad.
No, you're good. No, I think this is one of the best, if not the, but what I wouldn't, maybe it's not the best. Maybe it is. I don't know. I think this is definitely a top 5 DC animated movie, bar none. Like I just, I haven't seen all of them either, but I've seen enough of them where I'm like, this sucks. I stop it halfway through. I can't tell you how much I hated that Hush adaptation. Oh my God. I hated that Hush adaptation. I know the comic book, it's a lot of flack these days, but man, I gotta tell you that movie is one of the worst things I'd ever seen as far as adaptations. And I had no offense to the people working on it. I think they tried to cram a lot in 12 issues. Because remember, Hush is a long story. It's not some short story. It's a lot, and it's a lot to condense into one movie, and they try to do that, and it just did not work. You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of like an early comic movie like adaptation, where it's like they were trying to put so much into it to make the fans happy, but also realizing that like they couldn't make it a straight up adaptation, like the Dark Knight Returns or like Under the Hood, where it's like you're only tweaking things here or there. They tweaked a lot, and it just didn't work. I felt, again, my opinion. So there's lots of movies like that. A lot of the Suicide Squad movies I really wanted to like, and I just could not get into them. I'm like, this is just not my thing. And so I think Under the Hood just like you said, it trims the fat naturally, and I don't know. Again, it's not like one of those things where I would even call it fat. I'd be trimming, like, instead of getting like 4 cheeseburgers, you get 3 cheeseburgers, and they're all really good. You know what I mean? It's like you don't get, but you do you really need 4 cheeseburgers at once? Yeah. Maybe not, but 3 is just as good. But if you're a fat boy like me, you want to eat 4. Whatever. You get what I'm saying. I don't even know if I call that fat. I think
it's a successful and does an adaptation as you should, to where it's like, say you go to the movie first, you watch it, you really like it, you like this world, and it's like, cool. If you go back and read, like, it's going to expand the world a little bit more. expand the experience. And I think that's a really good adaptation. And it's tricky for the movie, especially for people who read the books first. And for me, I did feel like the 12 issue arc, especially the back half, it didn't feel like it kept its pacing as well as the front half did. And then I felt like the movie was mostly the front half. So
yeah, you're
I feel like that's how it just kind of keeps going. But I mean, we already talked about the book on the podcast and how I still really like the story.
Well, right. And I think that's the best point that you make up for the movie. And I would agree with that the movie is mainly that first trade with like just basically the last issue. This is kind of a bad analogy because I think Judd Winnick, who wrote the comic books and the movie, did a phenomenal job of navigating through everything. And that should really say something for him as a writer. That's pretty impressive to take an adaptation for a completely different medium. It's similar, but you're taking a different medium, you adapt your own story, and it probably make it even better at that point because you don't have the minutia and all like the baggage of the DC universe tie-ins and all the stop and goes they had to do and tie into different things. He had none of that baggage, and he was able to tell a really concise story, and he knew it so well. You could tell he loved that story so well that he just knocked it out of the park, and it shows. I mean, people love that story. I think it's really impressive how he was able to do that. And it's really cool because, obviously he's got to get things approved. He can't just put whatever he wants and they're going to, put it out there. So people who are editing this movie or producers who are reviewing this movie, they're letting him put and keep dialogue straight from the comic book into the movie because it works 100%. Like that's how good Judd was. I think that to me, when you can transcend a medium, that means you hit a good story. And I think that's where I think Under the Hood gets a lot of flack, where people, or not flack, but people don't give the respect to it because of all the baggage you have with again, if you want to know what we're talking about, go listen to the podcast. It's one of my favorite podcasts. That was a great podcast.
Stop it.
We did.
It was a good one. Yes. The episode, I'll say that. It was a great discussion. Carry on. And
the thing is, with that, there's a lot of baggage, but you can listen to us talk about that there. But here, it's like, the story was there, and he had, because in essence, what he wanted to tell was a story about, a son not, just couldn't believe that his father basically wouldn't avenge him. And that to me is the essence of the story, is that this person took me away from you, but yet you couldn't break your one rule for me because, you did not love me enough. That's essentially what he's saying. Yeah. And I think that was the core. That's the core of the story, obviously. And I think that Judd just hits that so freaking well. And it's just, it's chef's kiss, man. It's so good. And I think that to me, when you can transcend that means you hit a story. I mean, your story, you're a good creator. And that means that story was worth telling is what I'm trying to say. Is that when you can transcend that medium, and it's like it's almost the same thing. Even a lot of the dialogue's the same. The story acts are almost identical up until the very end. And again, the ending is this, it's like our buddy Chris Clow says, it's cleaner. And if you want to know what the other one is, listen to our podcast. But this one is completely clean. It works. It's great. I mean, honestly, it's amazing. There's just some really good stuff in here, man, that I rewatched it, for our podcast the other day, and I forgot just how good the performances are. And everybody.
Well, let's say so I feel also because, these movies, a lot of times they're under, like, they have a smaller budget. They have like a 75-minute runtime, which actually, like, this year, maybe last year too, they've started to push it. It's about like 80 minutes now, maybe 85, which doesn't seem like a lot. But when it could have had like more time, maybe he wouldn't have had to slash the fun part of including Mr. Freeze. Maybe he wouldn't have to slash Batman seeing Zatanna, seeing Superman, seeing Green Arrow.
Those are great moments. Yeah.
But what he does do, he slashes that, but he does put more Joker in here, and not just as Jason's revenge. He utilizes Joker in such an awesome way here. And DiMaggio also does an incredible job voicing the Joker.
Underrated voice.
He does what you have to do with the Joker, to where it's like, yeah, Joker is a bad guy, but you're laughing with what he's saying and doing. Like, he performs that really well. such an added, and I mean, this part's like right out of the book too. And he's included in that big finale. And by big finale, a strength from the book, a strength in the movie, it's small. It's in a room with 2 characters, and then he comes in. 3 characters, that's the big finale. And that makes it very emotional. It keeps it small. And I think including the Joker there is great too, especially, which it's said even in the book, of kind of like, I'm the only one who's going to get what he wants. And then he's just as happy that Batman stopped, like that Batman won too. And then he flips it, and then he's able to be like, no, I want to get like the movie almost just kind of like, I don't know. I think it just rests on the Jason and Bruce relationship, and the Joker is utilized perfectly. If he can't be the star of the show, is being that little shit that throws in and is really kind of messing up the plans too. And it's just like, man, like,
talking about, well, what he was able to do, Judd Winnick, was he took the elements of the Black Mask needing to get rid of the Red Hood. So what he did was he had to slash the Mr. Freeze line, but he gave it to Joker. And so, and it works because you put Joker into it. And again, that's knowing your story and knowing your strengths and knowing how to condense things and build up your tension. Again, maybe he had help, as far as like, structuring it, but like, that seems like it was like pretty easy. It seems so obvious, but it is a brilliant move. And he wrote a great Joker. I mean, I'm not sure how much Joker he wrote back on his Batman run, but I have to say, I mean, his Joker was perfect, but I think that the reason why it was perfect because DiMaggio's performance was so good. I mean, and here's why I think it's good. I think if you think about it, DiMaggio, his voice is dramatically different than the other Jokers. There's one big difference. I want to see if you picked up on this, and maybe other people have. And I'm at a touch.
Ask away.
What's the one glaring thing, at least in my opinion? I think it's glaring. Maybe it's not to everybody else, or what it's as obvious. But what do you think is the biggest thing that DiMaggio brings to this Joker performance? I want to see if you think the same thing I do. If you give up, I'll just tell you.
I mean, I was gonna say tries to not sound like Mark Hamill. Doesn't focus on sounding like Mark Hamill, but I mean, I think you're going for something a little bit more.
No.
I don't know.
You're kind of in the same vein. He's got a lower register than most of the Jokers. There you go.
Okay.
And I think that to me was interesting because most of the time you think of Joker as like hee, like it's like that, right? Like it's that high pitch hee. Whereas like this Joker was tougher. Like this Joker seemed like he could actually go in a brawl and beat the shit out of somebody.
So, and who knows if he took it from Ledger, but I mean, if anybody does a Ledger impression, you can feel it like here we go, like you hit something like that. And it's almost like when he talks to Magic, because I'm thinking of him when he's in Arkham and he's talking when Black Mask is talking to him and he's talking, well, I don't know. It's almost that weird kind of flat. And I think to me, that's like a deeper, I totally pick up on what you're saying of like, he's got that register.
Was this before Dark Knight? Because I think it was after. Okay, I want to say I thought it was maybe before.
2 years after the Dark Knight.
Dang, was that?
You were still watching Iron Man, so that's why I understand that you were so busy with this MC. Marvel's on me right here.
Yeah, exactly. No, but you're right. Maybe you're right. He's emulating Ledger, but I don't hear Ledger in that either, though. I mean, granted, because DiMaggio is obviously a legend.
I just think you make a really good point. Of Joker is usually like high pitched a little bit. Not that Hamill necessarily was. I'm not saying every single Joker was, but there is like if you do a Joker impression, it's like like he reaches some kind of like deep. You could if you watch the wavelengths while editing, you'd see that it's thick. It's like there's a register like that for DiMaggio. Like you said, I'm not claiming that I'm so smart. It's because you just pointed it out. It's like that makes total sense. That's what I'm thinking of. Some of his when he's not, I think when he's not at the end. No, I'm the only one who's when he's talking like this. I think you look at his wave and it'd be thick like that because he's reaching that like kind of talking about this sort of deal. That was terrible, DiMaggio. I can't know.
Well,
outrageous.
Outrageous. No, but like I think, but the reason why I think it's important is that it gives him a distinct voice, but also the fact again he gives him there's a toughness to it. Like they even drew him stocky. Like he's not like a skinny guy. It's like, it's purposely to make him a little bit more of like, again, he can beat the shit out of somebody. Like, it's not just gonna be, that's the one problem I've always had with the Joker, is that he physically is not going to scare anyone. Like, as far as like, if you're going fisticuffs straight up, right?
His
like,
Arkham scene of grabbing that glass, break, slice, and dice, and then he's just like that quick. I'm like, awesome. That goes perfectly with what you just said of like, he's more menacing, he's more of a threat because he has some more bulk to him here. But he's not like, it's not totally different to, you can almost relate it to Dark Knight Returns Joker. A little bit more
yes,
like
exactly.
that frame.
Yeah. Because he's got like
totally
no, he's got a stockier style, but I don't know if he's also, if that was a kind of side tangent. I'm not sure if he was going for a Talking Heads, Stop Making Sense. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that concert documentary, if you want to call it, by Talking Heads, David Byrne. He at one point wears like this suit that's like he's a skinny guy. He wears this big suit that's like way bigger than he is, and it looks really weird. Joker almost like he's wearing that at one point in Dark Knight Returns, and that came out in the late 80s around that time. So I'm wondering, like, was that an inspiration? But anyway, but I think DiMaggio, my thing with, even with the Dark Knight movie with Heath Ledger, it was always like, well, Joker can't really take on Batman because like he just physically is not going to be able to take him on. And there was ways around that, which I liked. Which, by the way, if we ever do a retrospective on video and you want to add some clips into this, we can talk about that movie. And I can't wait to talk about the ending, between the fight between those two in 4K. I've already talked about it online a little bit. I'm not sure if you saw it, but anyway, but yeah, I think to me, DiMaggio is what makes the movie work is Jason Todd, the guy, the actor, for his name,
Jensen Ackles.
He was Ackles is phenomenal, and Greenwood is phenomenal. They're great. They do phenomenal work. And then obviously Joker and DiMaggio, and those three is what makes this movie work. Like, if one of those three doesn't work, it just kind of, it's not as high as top 5, maybe one of the best or the best. I think because Greenwood's an underrated voice actor too. I love his Batman. I think his Batman's great. Eccles, Jason was great. I really did feel that youthfulness, but that also they had gone through some stuff. It wasn't just I thought, Neil Patrick Harris was fine as Nightwing. He was fine, but there was a youthfulness, like almost like an immaturity a little bit. Like Eccles was able to portray that and that loose cannonness, even though he bordered on that a little bit, and I loved it. And I thought that even the cadence between him and Nightwing was purposefully kind of similar, but Eccles had a little bit more of a energy to it than the Nightwing, like an energy and a rawness that Neil Patrick Harris was more reserved in, because again, he's Nightwing, right? And again, those little touches, those performances, they add up in a movie like this. And that's what's so important, especially when you're only doing voice acting. Your voice is all you have to emulate the character. So you have, as far as yourself as an actor, so you have to do every little trick in the book. And I don't know if that was purposeful, but I'm just reading too much into it. That's what it came out across to me. And I think Eccles, to me, DiMaggio and Eccles are the real heroes of this movie. They're the ones that like make it work. And again, that line when Eccles says, Bruce, I forgive you for not saving me.
Yeah.
But how could you let this piece of trash live? It's like, it's greatly, it's not over dramatic. It's a beautiful said, like, truth statement. And I thought Eccles
that's what I hear when I read the book now too, is how he reads that line of like, I forgive you. But the way he's like, I forgive you.
I forgive
why?
You.
And then it cut to, he breaks that closet door and Joker's sitting there and Joker's like, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so perfect. So one more thing before we move on to the final thing is, if you listen to the podcast about this, you knew that Paul hesitated and waited to come to this story because he heard about how Jason Todd was brought back. So comparing the comic to the movie, how did you feel about Jason's resurrection in the movie?
Well, in the movie, when I first watched it, I didn't know he was, like, I didn't know how he was brought back in the comics. I thought it was probably the same way. And then our friend Chris Cloud told me what happened, and I refused to. And again, you can listen to the podcast. It's fun.
Yep.
I will say this. I prefer this story as like how he's brought back, opposed to what we got in the comics as far as like what gets him out of being dead initially. This is obviously cleaner. It ties it more to Batman. It makes a lot more sense. But when you're doing a long continuity game like DC is and was, it's harder. You can't just do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think now with DC, with so many soft reboots they've had, they probably could easily retcon this and ignore what happened in the comic books from originally, because you've moved on different universes so much. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so many multiverses have been, you could easily just say, oh, that didn't happen, this will happen. And then just incorporate that.
There's just more depth and humanity to the movie version, because including Ra's in this, like the fact that Ra's feels guilty.
Well, he's responsible in this story.
Yes, exactly.
But that's the reason. He's not in the Death in the Family. He's not in the book. He's not part of that story originally. So you can't have Ra's unless you retcon it somehow, which would be really convoluted. But anyway,
but I totally agree. Looking at it with the movie, I just love like they add that to, you have Ra's or Ra's, depending how.
I agree.
Like he's kind of like responsible because he has the Joker distract while he messes with European finances and all that. And what happens is Joker, he even says it, like, I should have known better than I wasn't prepared for this. And so he felt guilty. And then he did the old switcheroo of the bodies and threw Jason in the Lazarus pit. And then he came out, it affected Jason. And that way, I loved that because it's just cleaner. You know, it's cleaner.
Absolutely.
But then it adds the layer of like when Bruce and Roz are, it's just when they're talking, not when they're fighting, like even when they're talking, I think that's like, if somebody's going to do that in a comic, in a movie or something, like you need to raise the bar, because this is the best versus the best in talking. And so I think that just including Roz for all of this, I think it totally worked, and I think it's much cleaner and works a lot better than the comic. And maybe we just addressed this too in the podcast. Maybe he was, it's not like he had total freedom. He had people to answer to, and those people might have said, you have to connect this to Infinite Crisis somehow. Like,
absolutely,
maybe, I don't know. I haven't talked to Judd. Judd, if you want to talk.
Judd, come on. You have me on to, bite me on with it, please.
We'll talk with Judd.
Yeah, we'll talk with Judd. Judd, you want to kick it with us? We super cool, man. We'll talk.
We love your work, Judd.
Yeah, we love your work. I watched your show back when I was a kid. I mean, come on, man. Come on, social support. No, I agree with you. I obviously it's cleaner. I think it's a better overall story. Mm-hmm. Because obviously Ra's goal is always going to be like the what if Batman became like hubris took over. Like that's what Raz represents. He's that ideal of vigilante justice and your own brand of justice, and how it gets perverted over time. If and your hubris takes over. That's what Ra's al Ghul is. Bruce Wayne's hubris taking over, and having them talk together is always, anytime it's in comics or movies or TV shows, it's always great to see. And this is no exception. I think he does a great job. Judd does, of writing two characters that really are kind of like they're two sides of the same coin, or one extreme of the other that's gone like way past gone way of the dodo, if you want to say whatever that saying is. But I think that's, again, the secret sauce of this adaptation is just like how he's able to take all the elements of the original story so great, but incorporate even more of the Batman mythos to where it's like, I mean, I think I'm not alone saying this, that we all, even again, I love the comic, and I listen to the podcast. I have a special place in my heart for that not how or why he's resurrected, but like what happens afterwards.
Yeah.
But how this all ties together. Obviously, this is the more preferred, what I probably consider my headcanon way of how, headcanon, I say loosely, way of what I think the Red Hood has brought back. And I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I will not be shocked in like 10 years if they make a live action movie of this adaptation down the road. I don't doubt it, because
as we said on the podcast, they found their groove with Jason Todd and the Red Hood now. And I mean, it adapted. He was a major part of this most recent season of Titans. So I mean, there he is in live action. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe I wouldn't tell you no, because I think that there is a chance that we could get him included somehow in a live action movie. I don't know.
I think if you could do a sequel where you could almost start like a BVS, where Robin's already dead, and you kind of start and you do a film, and you kind of start from there, and you build off again, you're launching a new franchise, a new, whatever universe. I think you could easily have it and be a sequel film. And the reason why I'm not just doing it because like, I love this character so much, you gotta put him in the movies. I love the character. I think he is the most underrated, most underused character in DC right now. Even though they're using him a bunch, I feel like there's so much rich storytelling with him that it's just, he's waiting for the right writer like Judd Winnick to come back into him and say, I'm going to breathe some new life into you. I said on the podcast, I'm like, he is just waiting for someone to really write him the right way. The Judd, like, take what Judd did and morph it even more. Take Judd and what Jeff Johns did, and basically just go off from there, your launching point, and go from there. I think there's so much rich storytelling. And the reason why I say you need to there should be a movie version of this is because I think there's so much good drama there of that idea of like, you let your son die. Your son died because of you. You're like guilt there, but yet you also didn't avenge. It's like, again, the whole parent angle, right? It's like he didn't kill the person that killed his parents, so he wouldn't kill the person that killed his son, his surrogate son. And there's a lot of drama there for like, but what if the parents knew he didn't avenge them or revenge? Would they be upset if he did? I mean, they wouldn't. But what if they were? That's what Jason represents. It's a dead coming back and challenging him and saying, you should have avenged me. Like that's the living nightmare. And that's what Jason represents. There's so much rich drama there that a mainstream audience would just ooze about, in my opinion. I mean, granted, it would take the right story, the right writers to adapt. And I don't think you could just do a movie straight ahead into it. You'd have to do a setup sequel and then kind of loosely talk about a sidekick and then bring him back. That's how you do it. But that's just my opinion. I think you will get that eventually because there's so many.
Jeff Johns. All right.
Oh, dude. Oh my God.
I would love it. It would be great. Oh, yeah. All right. Before we go, Paul, we have 2 questions.
Okay.
So let's get to these questions.
Yes, you've got a question?
From a friend of the show, Eric Carter, host of the Fire Rises Batman podcast. He says, hey guys, great book selection. When it comes to the story of Under the Hood, the consensus is that the animated film Under the Red Hood not only successfully adapted the source material, but in many ways improved upon it. Paul, you may have addressed this already. Today, I feel that people are not as forgiving of altering the source material for these animated films as they were at the time this one was released. Do you agree or not so much? And what are some others you think may have improved on the story they were based on? Thanks for answering and have a great show. Keep that bat signal lit and point it skyward. Thank you, Eric Carter.
Thank you, Eric.
So yeah, Paul, a couple different elements. So first of all, he says that he doesn't feel like today people are as forgiving of altering the source material for the animated films as they were when Under the Red Hood was released. Would you agree with that or not so much?
Yeah. And the reason why is because
it doesn't necessarily have to apply to DC animated. I mean, you can even say maybe Marvel stuff that's, I'm not familiar if Marvel stuff's animated or not much, but Marvel, overall, the whole spectrum.
It is. I mean, it is, but I think the reason why people are more hard, I think it's mostly DC stuff, but it's because Marvel has TV shows. They don't really do animated films as much. They did for a little bit, but they were not great. And excuse me. I would say the reason why people are harder on it now is because they're just churning that stuff out, man. Like they're not stopping. And I mean, they weren't stopping when they started back in the day, but it's gone. It feels like they've timed it by a lot more. So you're getting so many more adaptations that it feels like there's not a lot of TLC. Gotham by Gaslight's a great example of like, it's just, it's not, I mean, it's not, it's,
actually, go ahead.
I think both the comic and the book movie are they're such, I don't know. I don't think I think the movie isn't as good. I mean, it's just like, it just wasn't that interesting. And it's like, it's again, my opinion, but like, again, but this is almost embarrassing to say. I own the deluxe version of The Dark Knight Returns on Blu-ray, and I've only watched the first part. Okay. I've never watched the second part, and I think the reason, like, for even reading anything that's again like Long Halloween, I have zero interest of watching it because the comic book. And the comic book. Now I know. No offense, and I said it on my show.
Paul, we've lost Paul. All right, so you're talking about the Long Halloween movie and how fantastic it was. Yes, Paul. I'm right with you there.
But and maybe it is great, but I just have no interest of watching it because why watch something that's basically just adapting a great story when I'm gonna be losing my favorite thing about it. It's Tim Sale's art.
I think specifically I think that's valid in the sense of you have the Long Halloween perfection. So why do you need to see something that's trying to do that? But then you can almost get The Dark Knight heavily influenced by the Long Halloween, but it's not the Long Halloween. Apparently elements of it, and probably more so Dark Victory, inspired the Batman. Ego inspired the Batman, but they're not direct adaptations. Now, to more directly answer Eric's question, I think right now, for some reason, people are less forgiving of anything being changed. And the whole part of that is kind of what you just touched upon, but I'll take it even further of you've got the book. Why do you need that again? Because you're only setting yourself up for disappointment. But it's funny because you mentioned The Dark Knight Returns. And I always use Dark Knight Returns and Batman Year One, the animated adaptations. Year One wasn't received that great, but it was like exactly panel to screen. Dark Knight Returns was almost exactly panel to screen. And that one was received maybe much the better. Best of all of these DC animated movies. So that's an interesting thing to kind of compare. Be like, well, what did they do right? What did they do wrong? What did they do right? And where it really messes up, there's just not a simple answer.
I think you're right. There's not a simple answer, but I think I know a little bit of the answer. Okay. I think part of it is animation style. I think that again, it's been a while since I've watched The Dark Knight Returns. The first part
one,
which part one. Maybe we should go. For years, me and Andy on a Holy Bat cast talked about my first show will be us reviewing the movie of that, which is we've talking about it for like 5 years now. But maybe I'll do it for your show too. Whatever. But I think from what I remember of watching that, and I've seen it a couple times because I've always meant to watch it all the way through, which maybe I will now because I'm being called out. I think the animation style emulates Miller's actual artistic style to a little bit more faithful than Year One. Year One feels a lot more like an animated movie, whereas I feel that Dark Knight Returns, when I watch it, it's animated movie, but like it's done in Frank Miller's caricature style almost, like in the way like Batman looks really kind of stocky and just it emulates the actual art style of Frank Miller. And then I think it was it Mazzucchelli who drew Year One. It is a little bit more, what's the word? Simplistic. Again, not in a simplistic in a bad way, but like it's not as stylized as Frank Miller's Dark Knight was, and how everything that's just how I guess for me, it's like it's a little bit easier to go, okay, well, let's do traditional animation, like they're straightforward. Here's a Batman, here's a young Batman, here's a younger, Jim Gordon with a little bit red in his beard and blah, blah, blah. And it's kind of, it just hits all the notes, and it's not dynamic enough as an animation style, the way of taking the way Mazzucchelli draws, his panel structures and everything, his layouts. And the characters themselves look very, very like, just, they look good, but they're not like stylized as far as Frank Miller's characters are all like, they're almost caricatures of what the characters are from the, if that makes, again, I'm just kind of spitballing here, but it emulates anyway, I think the artistic style of Frank Miller a lot more visually than Year One does with Mazzucchelli. If they would have done a Mazzucchelli-ish, like literal like animation style and just made it move and made it flow a little bit more, you might have people like that story more. But I think that's what it is. Even though it's I think the Dark Knight just looks more like Frank Miller's, not completely like 180 or it's like 100% like just take it and animate it, but it's there enough where it makes you know instantly, if you looked at one picture of Batman, that's Dark Knight animation. Whereas if you took Batman from Year One and just put it out there, didn't tell anyone what it was, you go, it's Batman. You'd have no freaking idea that that'd be Year One Batman. But you know instantly what Dark Knight Returns Batman looks like.
There you go, Eric. That was answered to part one of your question. Now we're at part two, and quickly of what are some others you think may have improved on the story they were based on? I'll flat out say Under the Red Hood. I think Under the Red Hood improved upon Under the Hood story, but since even though Dark Knight Returns, maybe Dark Knight Returns, just because sometimes when I do, when I read that book and you do turn the pages and there's so many talking head points, I'm kind of like, okay, come on, and that flows a little bit better animated. But it didn't improve upon the story because it's the exact same story. So I do think Under the Hood changed the story a little bit to where I think it improved upon the source material. And ever since, I don't think anything's animated movie wise, even though I love the Long Halloween movie. Clearly I love the book. I don't think that the movie improved upon the book it was based on. So yeah, I don't know if you have any quick thoughts on that, Paul.
Really quick. Again, I don't disagree with you about it being improved on it, but I feel that, again, the Under the Hood had the original comic storyline, had a lot of baggage as far as, a lot to bring in with all the other universe stuff building it was doing. And you have to really look, you can't look at him as like, well, this story is so much better because of this. It's like if Judd didn't have to have everything tied up in his other universes, the art team would have been more consistent. And we talked about on the show, I think that if they had a more consistent art team, if Mankey was doing the whole thing all the way through, I think this book's a top 10 book for everybody. And again, because you don't have the gaps. And again, if you have Mankey the whole time, you probably don't have to tie it into every, universe building thing. It's a lot cleaner, like we talked about. So I think it's hard for me to justify, of course, this is better. Yeah, it's better because it doesn't have to tie into anything. It's its own thing. Whereas Judd Winnick is having to tie into like literally two major events, Identity Crisis and Infinite Crisis. And those are not just things you can sweep under the rug. Those are basically why Jason's in the freaking movie in the book in the first place. So you're right, it improves, but it's not, I don't think it's fair to this comic to hold it up to that either.
Eric, thank you for the question, pal.
Yes, thank you.
And I'm getting to this quick because Paul, what you just said goes into our other question here from another friend of the show, Joe Fornerato, who's also friends with Eric
Hi,
Carter.
Joe. I like you, Joe.
He has like a quick two-parter, but I think we kind of answered him and you kind of just did. The first is, do you think the story would have been better had it not been tied to Infinite Crisis? Yeah.
You go first.
Kind of said that. No, that's my answer. Like, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. I would say, I mean, yes and no, because again, I love that annual, dude. I love the annual so much. Besides Superboy Prime, I love that annual. Anyway, so I would say
his second part then is, do you prefer his resurrection in the animated film, or do you prefer the film in general?
I prefer the film in general because it is cleaner and it's the origin of Superboy Prime punching the universe and Jason resurrecting is.
I just don't. I don't like it. That's not my style.
It's bad. It's bad. It's really bad. It's very comic booky, and I love it because of that. But it's a terrible decision I think, or it's
Terrible.
stupid in
Terrible.
retrospect. But again, the annual is great, and I prefer.
Yeah.
What I'll say this. This is what I'll say. I prefer how he gets resurrected in the movie more, but I prefer what happens afterwards in the comic more than the movie, because I think the comic does a better job of really showing you like what Jason is going to go through. His journey, exactly. It's just the start of it, because we have the Red Hood Lost Days, whatever it is. So, I finally got the trade paperback, by the way.
Woohoo!
You know what that means? Coming on the Comic Binge, baby.
Hey, Comic Binge.
Hey,
there we go. Joe, thanks for the question. And Paul,
love you, Joe.
That's gonna wrap us up for here for the first pages screen for the Batman Book Club.
We did a pretty good job, I think. Like
we did. We said we were gonna stick around this time. We doubled it. That's what we do, because we both like to talk about Batman.
I told you, bro. I told you.
Probably do this in 25 minutes. We're at a good 45, but whatever.
That's
talking Batman.
That's under an hour. It's under an hour. That's not bad.
No, that works. So, Paul, why don't you go ahead and plug some stuff where people can follow you?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at Hermann22 with 2 N's, aka P Thug. You can also follow Comic Binge on YouTube. Subscribe and like all my videos because you love me. And also you can follow all those things on Instagram and TikTok when I eventually have energy to post videos. I just launched a new online comic book called Space Demons. You can find it on
teased it in the podcast, and boom, here you are.
Here I am. Yeah, so please check out Space Demons on Webtoons. Part 1 just dropped. We're hurrying. Antonio's hard at work at part 2. This is just the first kind of my first venture in writing comic books, and I love it. It's freaking amazing. Awesome. And I can't wait to eventually launch our eventual Kickstarter later in the year for the most personal project in my life. And it is, I just can't wait for it to share everyone, because the Antonio's art, dude, is unreal. Like it just, awesome. I show people the stuff, the characters he's working on for our next story, the big one. And I just like this. They're amazing. Like it transcends everything I am writing. It's really impressive. Like it's like if anyone even remotely likes our book when we put it out, it's because of him, not because of the story, but because of his art. His art's, I mean, Space Demons now, his art's what makes that story. It looks incredible. Everyone's like, there was a comment on the recently, some guy, and I don't guy or gal, I'm not sure who it was, but they said they were very nice. They said, I wish it was more of a traditional Webtoons format, which I'm very new to Webtoons, so I didn't really know what they were referring to. But they go, but the art's amazing. It's like, yeah, don't have to tell me twice. The art's amazing. So but please check that out. Like it, subscribe to that. Webtoons, Space Demons, a lot of fun. Part 2, hopefully by the end of the year. We'll hopefully get more out there and look for a Kickstarter next year sometime.
Booyah! Well done, Paul. I've seen it. It's awesome. Great art. Yes, indeed. But hey, it's about story too. So don't sell yourself short. Okay.
So it's story's okay.
If you're listening and or watching it this, then probably the best place to go is to the Batman Book Club podcast, which you're probably listening to if you found this. I'd be really surprised if anybody found this and doesn't know about the podcast. That's on all the major podcast plays like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, Google Play, Amazon, all the good stuff. You can follow on Twitter at the Batman BC. You can also do it on Instagram for latest episode drops and upcoming episodes, in which actually the next episode is a big one. You may have heard of it. The Dark Knight Returns.
I can't wait.
It's at the time of this recording, I have not recorded it yet, but it's up next with Robert Reinecke, an encyclopedia of comic book knowledge. This guy knows everything about comics, so it's going to be awesome. Just follow the show there, and for Paul, I am Ryan, and so until next time,
read more Batman comics.
Lawrence.